At my core, I am an introvert. I may at times appear to be an extrovert, but I'm really not one. In reality, I force myself to be an extrovert in certain situations. I made a video on my journey through extreme indifference, and I recommend you give it a watch for the context of this video, though you don't have to. In essence, I lived through a lot of my life with indifference, and I only recently overcame most of it. There were other things involved with my indifference, such as a lack of empathy, a lack of emotions, lack of sentiment, and a lack of a desire to establish interpersonal relationships. I can't say I've entirely overcome them all, but when I did, for the most part, crawl out of the hole I was stuck in for most of my life, I felt behind. I lost so much time on building relationships, and I felt as though I needed to catch up somehow. Due to this, I forced myself to become more extroverted around people I didn't know. I had to learn a lot of things before I could do this, however. I had to learn what social cues were and how to follow them, first of all. One large difference between extroverts and introverts is that social cues tend to come subconsciously to extroverts. True extroverts don't always have to think about what to do and what not to do depending on the context of the social situation. As an introvert, I had to learn these social cues and rules, which was difficult enough on its own, but I also had to apply them in social situations. Even now, I still have to consciously think of every social cue during even simple conversations and small talk. I'm constantly thinking of even simple stuff such as maintaining eye contact, my hand gestures, and what not to say in the context, regardless of the conversation I'm having. Consequently, I find social interaction, regardless of who it is with, exhausting. I love spending time with my friends just as much as anyone else does, but it's still tiring for me to be constantly conscious of social cues and rules. Unlike harem protagonists, I do not have the density of a neutron star. I may act dense for convenience, but I am usually aware of the implications behind what people say, how they say it, and how they act during an interaction. I've recently started college and have found myself attempting to introduce myself to new people all the time. Luckily, my roommate is my introverted high school friend, so I haven't had to worry about that. Anyway, in a lot of group conversations, I found myself lacking presence. I've realized that this wasn't an issue I've only had here at college. Throughout all of my life, I've experienced scenarios where I lack presence. In Yuru Yuri, one of the running jokes is that Akarin lacks presence despite her protagonistic appearance. I don't believe that this is an issue unique to just a select few people. We've all likely experienced a situation where we felt out of place or where people simply don't acknowledge our existence. As I described earlier, I have definitely had my fair share of those experiences. Akarin isn't a representation of a specific situation for a very narrow group of people to identify with. Anyone can identify with her situation. The truth is, mine, yours, everyone's presence is scarce. It's a scarce resource, and naturally it's also a resource that we all need and want. Social circles and groups are, well, a battlefield where everyone is fighting over their already scarce presence, desperately clinging to the little presence they have while also craving more. As humans, it's natural that we all want to be acknowledged, but just like any battlefield, there are those who are left with less. That's just how it is. This cruel battlefield, specifically when those involved are strangers, supports those who are more extroverted, which forces introverts such as me to be extroverted, even if it is only an act. That is partly the reason that introverts stick to small groups of people that they are close with, rather than broadening their network of friends. In episode 11 of Yuru Yuri Season 2, we see a new perspective on Akarin's presence. She gets trapped in the past when she accidentally uses a time machine, leaving everything behind in the present. She decides to use it as an opportunity to fix her past mistakes, but then she soon realizes that fixing those mistakes would change everything, and that she greatly misses all of her friends. She makes a determined effort to return to her present time, and eventually she finds a way to get back. On her way back, she reflects on all of her friendships and believes that they wouldn't even realize she was gone because of her lack of presence. However, when she does return home, to her surprise, she finds all of her friends creating missing person signs to hang up around the school and town. This episode portrays a specific theme, and that is that regardless of how little presence you have in any social situation or group of people, someone will always acknowledge you. There's always someone out there who knows of your presence and who will never forget it. Sure, your presence is scarce, but you know what? That's okay. Even if you think that all is lost and no one has or ever will acknowledge your presence, I want you to know that I do. Each and every one of you who watches this video, I acknowledge you. I acknowledge your presence, and I will never forget it.